Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always. Here, sitting down for the third time to try to record the podcast. We have had some audio issues. The third time we're sitting down to do it. About the fourth or fifth time we've actually tried it. We have had some audio issues. This is the last time I'll offer to house sit for one of my friends forever because of not having my equipment. But Greg, how are you doing?
Um, Tom Downey owes you. Tom Downey is the person that Joe is house sitting for. He's one of our good friends from high school. So I think he owes you at least a like and a subscribe at bare minimum if he hasn't already done that. So get on him if he hasn't already done it.
You're the enforcer. We're gonna make you do it. You're the big guy in the paint, protecting the paint. So yeah, we apologize to everyone. This will be coming out probably Tuesday afternoon, and we may have missed some stuff and maybe a little bit later than usual. We tried to get ahead of schedule. We tried to record Sunday, didn't work out. Tried to record Monday, didn't work out. So we're trying on Tuesday. It looks like it's working. We're gonna see how that keeps up here going forward. So let's just get right into it. We have to review some games from last week. We're gonna start with Utah and St. Mary's. Utah wins this one. Gabe Madsen had a big game. He's had some big games for Utah this year with hitting some threes. It really opens up the floor for Brandon Carlson. And they also have Rolly Worster, a point guard who has 5 assists per game, who I just think it's fun to say Rolly Worster. St. Mary's, a little bit of a panic situation now going on, Greg. I know you liked them earlier in the season. But Aiden Mahaney can still score. It just doesn't seem like they have much else going for them.
Yeah, I was gonna yell at you for picking them to win the WCC this year, and then I realized that was me. And I feel like I keep hearing that this week. I kept hearing that was kind of the catchphrase, something along the lines of a team that was picked to win the WCC or a team that was picked to compete for the WCC. So I'm not the only one that had this idea. The issue is when everyone's thinking something, it's usually not what happens. So this is just a team that at this point, yes, I liked the continuity they had coming into the season, but we're just going to put them on the back burner until they give me a reason to pay attention to them again.
Yeah, I would do the same thing. And even for Utah, who's had a good start to the season, until they can really prove themselves in the Pac 12, not really worth going too much detail until they win some big games. One of the teams that did win a big game, though, Greg, Kentucky beat Miami, absolutely killed them. They had some good games from Reed Shepard. He had 5 threes in this game. DJ Wagner left with injury, but they were already rolling at that point. And Trey Mitchell's been just a godsend for this team after the late transfer from West Virginia. Ability to stretch the floor as a stretch 5 right now, and then when more of the big guys come back, I'm sure it'll be a more before. So they get this big win, and then they lose to UNCW just because that's how college basketball goes.
Yeah, we do have the benefit of hindsight, so we look at this game in a different lens. So if we had recorded this Tuesday night or Wednesday night of last week, we'd have been, all Kentucky, all Kentucky. And I'm not saying we're throwing Kentucky to the fire or anything like that. They almost lost to St. Joe's, but then we've seen St. Joe's go and beat Villanova. So that loss is maybe I'm sorry, not a loss for Kentucky, but that loss for Villanova maybe started to make sense in context. We just kind of go with the UNCW. Everybody gets one. If anything, we think, okay, Aaron Bradshaw's first game back in the lineup. Maybe that just caused a little bit of chemistry issues. Still, absolutely a game Kentucky should win and needs to win, but they didn't pull through. But we see everybody gets one. Joe, the one thing I know, obviously Joe's already referred to. We've already recorded this or tried to record this 3 times. So Joe, please forgive me if I sound like a broken record to you. But give me your answer again. Can Reed Shepard be All-American type player or player of the year, even if it's conference player of the year coming off the bench? Or is it going to be a moot point even when DJ Wagner becomes healthy again? He was hurt in this Miami game. Is Reed Shepard just going to be moved into the starting lineup like he was for the UNCW game?
I think he will not end up being that. I think it's possible. I think he's a player who could be used off the bench because he does have such a love for Kentucky basketball. He is not a guy who is at Kentucky just for his own benefit. I think if you would have told him, hey, you could be a one and done, like even 2-3 weeks ago, he'd be like, you're crazy. But he's just played well against good teams and showed that basketball has transitioned from more of a you have to be athletic to more of a skill thing. And not that he's not athletic, but it's we have Steph Curry changing the games and being more skill based than athleticism focused. And yeah, I think he could win a lot of awards. He can win SEC Freshman of the Year. He can win whatever he might need, even off the bench, because they're going to rotate those three guards. And Greg, you've heard this too 3 times, but I really like that they have 3 different guards who can do 3 different things too. I mean, Rob Dillingham, his ability to create space with the dribble, passes pretty well. DJ Wagner finishes at the basket better than any of them. And then Reed Shepard being able to pass and shoot is really going to help this team down the stretch. However teams choose to guard them is going to be a big factor in which player decides to have a big game and which nights. All right, so as mentioned, Kentucky does not get the win at UNCW. They're actually right now, Greg, practicing without a basket. So they're just basically doing wall sits, and they are practicing their defense. John Calipari's not too happy with how the defense played in that game, so we'll see how they're able to come back. Next one up, we have Clemson and Alabama. Clemson wins this one. It was a game that I think we were not expecting in the fact that we picked Alabama. They were at home. Alabama has some parts that still need to come together. They have a lot of transfers. Mark Sears had 23 points. But Clemson looks for real. We talked about Brad Brownell and how we don't know if we can believe in this team. PJ Hall is pretty good, 21 points. Joe Girard, the transfer from Syracuse, helps out. Chase Hunter's pretty good as well. They have the talent enough to do some pretty impressive things this year.
Yeah, if you'd have listened to us, particularly Joe, in the preseason when we previewed this team, Joe mentioned both PJ Hall and Joe Girard, and here we are. They're getting a big win on the road at Alabama. Of course, Alabama, they did drop out of the top 25, but still a quality win. I don't have the net rankings in front of me, Joe, but I would imagine that's still on the road probably, even if it is not now, I would imagine since they'll end up top 75. So it's probably going to be, even if it's not at the moment, it's probably going to be a quad 1 win for Clemson. Good win for them. And then they went on Sunday and they won at Pitt, another team who's, I mean, somewhat been, playing all right this year, was expected to be a somewhat decent team. So looks like they're stringing some wins together. We qualified the last time we talked about this. We qualified for real for Clemson, means making the tournament. I believe when I looked up last night, 2021 was the last time they made the tournament. So that's good for them. We do this dance with Brad Brownell, it feels like every year, but we're not going to do this thing where we say, past results, indicate future when it's a completely different team, a completely different year. So for now, everything that we have is indicating that it looks like Clemson is, as we say, for real, meaning they should be a tournament team going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, again, something you just never know with Clemson. They are the highest rated ACC team in the net right now, 18th. They do have 2 quad 1 wins, I'd imagine. One of those was the win at Alabama. So that's a big step for them. And, they could be a team that surprises people in the ACC. There's a lot of doubts we have with some of these teams in the ACC that we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. Let's start with the next thing we have is Virginia beating Texas A&M, and more of a surprising result. Texas A&M did not have Tyrese Radford in this game. Henry Coleman played well, 16 points, 14 rebounds, and they still always have Wade Taylor, who is, again, living up to All-American hype. But they go to Virginia. They have to play Virginia style, and Virginia wins 59-47. I still don't know what the ceiling for this Virginia team is, because there's times where you just need baskets, and I don't know who's going to get those for them. But it's a good win for them nonetheless. And Texas A&M, I'm not freaking out about it at all. I think it's just not being 100% hurts them, and also being on the road and playing their style is a very unique thing to college basketball these days.
Yeah, I think Virginia definitely has that capability to make teams uncomfortable, just like he kind of said. Couple thoughts here. Texas A&M side, like you said, no Tyrese Radford. It looks like this is kind of a 3-man team with Henry Coleman, Wade Taylor, and Tyrese Radford, and it looks like Virginia just kind of made Wade Taylor uncomfortable. You didn't have your third player that is doing your scoring, so it was basically all Henry Coleman, and that's just not a way you're going to win a game. One note, just a little interesting tidbit, Joe. I have the box score in front of me, so I don't know what you have up on your computer. Do you know how many bench points Virginia got in this game? And if you also have it up, then
I do not have it up, but let me guess. 5.
It's lower than that.
Is it 0?
I'm going to give it to you in the interest of time. Yes, it's 0. So Jacob Groves, yeah, he's one of the Groves brothers that transferred in from Oklahoma, correct?
Yeah.
So they got Isaac McNeely, Reese Beekman, we've been hearing out for a couple of years, Ryan Dunn. So starters look fine. All 5 players, double figures, not bad, but I get worried when I look at a team and I see 0 points off the bench. Yes, it makes me very happy if I was Coach Bennett, seeing, okay, all 5 of my players that started the game scored in double figures. That's great, but you got to get something off your bench. That's an oddity. They won the game. That's good for them, but just an interesting thought going forward. It doesn't look like it's weird because I don't want to say they don't have depth, because 5 starters scored double digits, but you get 0 off your bench. That's just something to note going forward. I feel like I was hearing some thoughts about this team in the preseason, and maybe they are going to be good, but we'll just have to see about them.
Yeah, definitely a team worth watching to see what happens, because that's just so abnormal in college basketball these days. You need 6 men, you need a 7th guy to step up. You definitely need 7 guys to be good and be able to advance far in the tournament. Probably need 8 that you can count on, more so than anything, and then have other guys who can step up if called upon. But an 8-man rotation is probably the most common in college basketball. And if you can't get points from more than 5, then you're really struggling.
Yeah, Joe, as I've been watching games this year, I like to note, I keep my notebook kind of like you do for both college basketball and college football. If you haven't already, check out Joe's Twitter, full of great NFL and college football content other than just the college basketball stuff that we talk about. But I started with keeping like 10 slots for guys on each team to kind of note names and numbers just for me. And I've already knocked that down to 8, because it seems like not maybe as much as I do in tournament time, but coaches are already starting to slim down those rotations. Like, it seems like maybe some of these exhibition games that we watched and some of the early season games, not that we've kind of left the early season, but the first week when you were playing those bye games, coaches were using, 11, 12 guys. And now it really already is starting to slim down.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes sense. You need players to get in rhythm, and you have best players. You got to play the best players. I still keep track of all 10, and it's like, bottom of those rotations, it's almost like those guys play 2 minutes a game and it doesn't matter. So definitely more of an 8-man rotation type of game. Let's go over Colorado State, Greg. Colorado State got 2 big wins this week. They win 88-83 over their rival Colorado. Isaiah Stevens with a big game, 20 points, 11 assists. And let's just bang out the other one while we're right here now. They also beat Washington, and that was a game where Isaiah Stevens did not really score as well and did not have as good of a game, but they were able to win despite that. That's really encouraging for this Colorado State team, who could be a team that gets a pretty high seed out of the Mountain West this year.
Yeah, Colorado State, again, one of the benefits of recording this, instead of Sunday night, now we actually got the benefit of seeing Monday morning first net rankings come out. Usually a little wonky throughout the season, but Colorado State opens up top 7. They open up at 7th, and I believe I saw somewhere about the number of Mountain West teams in the top 50. I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but I know it was 3 or 4. So already looking like a good conference there. Good win for them. I like that Colorado team. Of course, KJ Simpson. They got a 5-star freshman in Cody Williams. There's a lot to like about that Colorado team, but this Colorado State team was not a team that I had on my radar in the preseason, and it just seems like they're making us pay attention to them.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point, Greg, 5 were in the top 50. I just checked. As of right now, maybe not the initial ranking, but as of right now, with things being updated, at least on the nitty-gritty report that I like to watch every day, that's where they're at. So it's a very good conference. I had mentioned that preseason they're probably only getting 2 bids. You said maybe more, and you might be right this time. We'll see. A lot of times when they get
I'm the Mountain West stan, Joe. I watched a lot of Mountain West basketball last year.
Yep.
So that's how I knew about Stephen Ashworth going to Creighton. But it looks like it's let's not get too ahead of ourselves and say 4 or 5. I think these teams might cannibalize each other a little bit once they get into conference play, but I think 3 bids is definitely achievable. I think it should be expected at this point, honestly.
I'm going to stick with 2. I think those teams will beat each other up, and then they also have the opportunity for some bad losses in that conference. As we know, it's kind of killed teams in the past, and they will overpass some of these teams, even if they rank well in the net. If they're 29th or 30th in the net, and sometimes they don't make the tournament. That's how it works. So next thing up, Greg, we talked about some ACC teams who are struggling right now. Arkansas beats Duke 80-75. The crowd was pretty crazy. Arkansas, one of the toughest places to play in all the country. They think I capitalized on Duke's weaknesses here. Kyle Filipowski got his 26 and 10, but Duke keeps on struggling finding other contributors to step up. And if we know anything about Arkansas, is they have so many contributors that can't even keep all of them on the floor. So it's a little bit different styles and a different game. Maybe we didn't expect this from Arkansas, who already has 3 losses on the season. But Duke, I think, has some real issues, and we're going to talk about another game they had in a second here too.
Yeah, I think, Joe, when we talked about Arkansas in the preseason, we just said we didn't know what to think of this team. Of course, they ended up in the preseason top 25, but when there's that much turnover, not unlike an Alabama team we see, sometimes it's just hard to get those guys rolling and know what the rotations are going to be like. And, it looks like Arkansas went yesterday and struggled with Furman. They ended up pulling that game out. So they just might be a bit of a roller coaster. Of course, we're happy to see Trayvon Brazile back after injury last year. El Ellis transfers in from Louisville. There's a lot to like about this team. Khalif Battle in from Temple. So there is a lot going on with this team. How consistent can they be? That just remains to be seen. I think once they figure things out, maybe we'll be looking at a back end top 25 team, maybe looking at a 5 or a 6 seed come tournament time, somewhere thereabouts. Maybe not exactly that seed, but just in that ballpark. Duke, it's the same story, man. We've talked about this how many times now? It's Filipowski, it's Roach, and that's it. Of course, Duke went on again, and we can go ahead and get into this now since we're already talking about Duke. They went on to lose their opening ACC game against Georgia Tech. Now, we will give them a little note here. Tyrese Proctor got hurt in that game, but that's still, that's a game they need to win. Georgia Tech they beat Mississippi State this week. So, but then Mississippi State went and lost to Southern. There's a lot going on here. The first time we recorded this, I made mention that I feel like it's the Charlie Day gif where he's connecting all the dots with the red strings and all the pictures, and it's inception-y, but some of these results, they conflict, they interact, but that Georgia Tech game is still a game Duke they need to win. This game at Arkansas, it was loud. Joe, I don't know if you actually sat down and watched this game live, but that was the first thing that you could feel the atmosphere coming through the TV. That's maybe an understandable loss, even against an Arkansas team that, might be up and down this year, but it's just, we keep seeing the Duke team rear its ugly head every time we talk about them losing a game. It's the same issue. It's a 2-man team right now.
It's a 2-man team. This is a team I'm concerned about long term in college basketball. I think it could be. I don't want to say like misses the tournament. They're going to make the tournament, but it could go from a team that was preseason top 3 for most people, and it could be a team that ends up being like a 7 to 10 seed. If you look at everything going on so far this year, that was a tough game at Arkansas. Don't get me wrong, but you just can't keep on dropping these games. They're 1-3 against quad 1 through 3 opponents. They're going to have a chance to get things back on track. And this stretch here, these next 2 games are huge because they play Charlotte and Hofstra for the next 2 weeks, and then they have Baylor right before Christmas on December 20th. They need to make sure they win those games. I know it should be a foregone conclusion with them, but then if you lose to Baylor, like how many quality wins are you getting? Is the ACC going to provide many quality wins? There's a lot up in the air, and this ACC too, I should say, wide open. I mean, we talked about Clemson. North Carolina had some good flashes, but maybe not quite all the way there. Virginia has that big win against Texas A&M. Miami lost to Kentucky, but still has really good guard play. They could finish conceivably 3rd through 5th in the ACC, and then where does that leave you? I don't know. It just depends on how good the ACC ends up stepping up. So there's a lot of concerns. They need to figure it out. Proctor being hurt doesn't help that. We'll see how they're able to bounce back. All right, so next thing up, we have Houston beating Xavier. Greg, Houston was the much better team, but it was a tough environment. Xavier wins a lot of their home games. They played tough, and now there's some hope with Jerome Hunter coming back. So possibly in the future, he's limited in practice right now. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's some news we got recently. I still haven't heard. I know we talked about this before. I still haven't heard anything. But I had on Zach Freemantle, I had just written off Hunter and Freemantle and assumed that this team was playing the whole year without 2 of their arguably, I mean, you could maybe say their top 2 players outside of Desmond Claude, but I said last week when we recorded, I was going to be happy if Xavier put up 55 points against that Houston defense and they walk out and they score 60. I know it was at home. I'm still happy with the way they performed. Of course we did see them earlier in the week before they played this game lose a home game to Oakland. We always say everybody gets one. The Xavier team, we had kind of already written them off, so a loss here or there that seems confusing is not necessarily as confusing as it would be with other teams. We're still looking at this team possibly as sneaking into the tournament. I don't think either of us have ever been very high on them. There was no Trey Green in this game. I don't think that makes a huge difference, but still a note. We have seen some play time from Dalen Swain and some of these guys that I didn't maybe have, not Dalen Swain, but some of these other guys on the team that I didn't maybe have on my radar. So I'm overall happy with it. It's a loss, but it's a good loss. I don't know if you're one of those people that doesn't like that term, but I'm happy with it. So
I don't mind good loss. I prefer like understandable loss. Like there's times where you should lose, and if you play well, you still will lose. If you play your best, you still will lose, and that's what Xavier was going to do here. This is a team that I think could be a lot like Villanova last year, that starts the season off slow, maybe goes around 500 before they get into conference play, or even like late into conference play, and then maybe they're a team that can do some damage late in the year like Villanova did, where we were talking Villanova almost got on the bubble a little bit for a time there. So if they get more players, if you get Jerome Hunter comes back, if the freshman develop, that's what it could be. I still think they're probably more of an NIT team, but Sean Miller's done a great job, so I'm not going to doubt him either. Kansas and UConn played one of the bigger matchups of the college basketball season so far. Kansas wins this one at home. UConn, we had mentioned, Greg, playing really good basketball this season after losing so much from their team that it's kind of surprising. Tristan Newton's played really, really well this season. Kansas, there's a lot of complaints about maybe getting some home cooking. That's what happens in college basketball, big programs. But they're starting to figure things out. There's still some concerns overall with the shooting ability, but this is a big win for them.
Yeah, UConn playing without Stephon Castle, 5-star freshman. Maybe he's the difference in this game. I still think Kansas defended really well. They just did not allow UConn to get a lot of open shots. They switched a lot. But the thing that was the most fun to watch was Tristan Newton, 10 for 18 from the field, 6 of 9 from 3. And it wasn't just the pure percentages. The degree of difficulty on those shots that he made was insane. I mean, some of those shots were deep. Some of them were, hand touching his eyelashes, and his shooting pocket is over the guy's hand. I mean, there was just some shots that he made that were ridiculous. We heard about Donovan Clingan maybe being that guy. Joe, I know I mentioned you. I saw some people even have him on a preseason All-American. I thought that was a bit much for him. 8 and 7 against Hunter Dickinson. I mean, it's a pretty average game. Hunter Dickinson finished with 15 and 9. That's for what he's done thus far this year. That's a little bit of a off game for him, I guess, when he's got one game this year where it was 20 and 20. So we're still looking at Kansas the same way we are. Obviously, this is a good win. This is a win at home, but it's a 3-man show. We're still getting nothing anywhere else. We haven't gotten anything from Juwan Harris since that first game. Elmarco Jackson he's good for a bucket or two every game. I think we already kind of mentioned this Nick Timberlake transferring in from, it's Towson, correct?
Towson, yep.
Just want to make sure. Just doesn't seem to be what they thought he was going to be coming in. Don't know if there's anywhere else that they're going to get help from, but this is one of those teams that maybe doesn't have as big of a problem as Duke does, because they've at least got 3 guys that can get them points every night, even though most of KJ Adams' points are little bunnies or dunks, but still, I mean, he's putting the ball in the basket at a high rate. So, Joe, I'm a little concerned about this team. Preseason number 1, I would have questions about picking this team to, like, matchup dependent. I would have questions about picking this team to go to the second weekend.
I'm thinking the same thing. Like, I think anyone, maybe they win the Big 12, maybe they get a top 2 or 3 seed in the tournament. I'm still afraid to pick them. That'll be a popular pick in a lot of brackets for people that you do bracket challenges with, because they'll see Kansas and want to take them, right? But they had, in this game, they played 6 guys basically. Parker Braun and Timberlake played 2 minutes each. They still have a problem with their guards scoring. So Kevin McCullar is the only guard. He's guard forward, whatever you want to call him. He's 21 points, he's the key to the whole team because if he has a bad game, this team goes nowhere. They just have no perimeter scoring at that point. This is going to be a tough team, I think, in the tournament because if you get a team who can make Hunter Dickinson guard away from the basket and maybe get some foul trouble too, there could be, I don't want to say like a 16 versus a 1 upset, but you're right. Second weekend is a tall task when you're going to be playing some really good guards. And just imagine if Castle did play in this game with Newton, because Newton was one of 2 guys in double figures for UConn, and they would have more of a threat out there. So I think this is a good win for them, but I still have doubts about them long term. They're still, it's like one of those. It's almost like the Eagles in the NFL right now, Greg. They're getting wins, but there's some things that are going on that are really concerning that make you think maybe this team isn't going to win the Super Bowl. Maybe Kansas isn't going to win the tournament this year. Just something to keep an eye on. Next thing up, we have Marquette and Wisconsin, a rivalry game. Wisconsin's able to win this one. This has been a team that has been maybe up and down to start the year. Kind of hard to figure them out a little bit. Marquette 6-2 had some good wins. Went to Maui and everything. Cam Jones, 19 points in this game. Really impressed with Wisconsin being able to get production from different players. Crowell was the one who stepped up in this one with 16 points and eight rebounds. It's a team that I like. It's just they need to be more consistent and figure out their rotation because they have some problems there too.
Yeah, I know we already talked about this with a different team today, but 1 point away from all 5 starters in double digits. That's good. They only got a few points off their bench. The only reason I'm giving them a pass and not giving them kind of the same treatment that I did Virginia, saying what the heck here, is Connor Sejan's on their bench. We know what he can do. We know he can force the issue. Maybe he's just not quite feeling right. I feel like I remember that he was kind of dealing with an injury in the preseason. So that's one where I like what I'm seeing elsewhere on the team. Maybe it's just going to take him a while to get going. I feel like I saw some of these younger guys that they had maybe contributing a little more in the early season. I don't know. We'll just have to watch Wisconsin. We both said we like what they are. They're a good team going forward. This loss for Marquette, yeah, they're top 3 team in the country, but I'm not really worried. It's a rivalry game. It's on the road. They really don't have any bad losses this year. So this is one that just, it is what it is. Wisconsin's got Michigan State coming up, a team that we thought was going to be good coming into the year. So that game is tonight. I don't know off the top of my head what Marquette has coming up. If we're just looking ahead for them. They have Texas. We'll talk about that. So we'll get to that when we pick games later. But overall, good win for Wisconsin and not really anything concerning for me for Marquette. Joe, do you feel differently?
No, just the overriding Shaka Smart getting to the second weekend thing, but the team on the court I like, and I think they can do big things this year. We have Gonzaga beating USC. They win 89-76. This is a game where we maybe saw USC's weakness, and this might be a 2-man show for them too. Boogie Ellis, 28 points. Isaiah Collier, 14 points. Greg didn't get double digits from any other player on the team. Seems like they're having trouble figuring out the rotation. Yes, Bronny James is going to come back here soon. I don't know if that helps or hurts because they have so many guys that are trying to figure out what this rotation is. It's going to be a tough road for USC, and for Gonzaga, they still have the same depth issues, but they keep on answering the challenge every time that they go up against good teams.
Gonzaga is 1 point away from 7 guys in double figures. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty deep team, even if they're only playing 7 guys. I like that. Obviously, we know what we got in Ryan Nembhard coming in as transfer from Creighton. Glad to see Graham Ike is healthy again. Nolan Hickman, touted 5-star freshman, looks like he's contributing now. I've already said in the preseason, I liked what I saw from Ben Gregg. I do want to make a note. It looks like Graham didn't take any threes this game. I said I can't remember what game I watched. I think it was the Purdue game. He was just letting them fly, and that may have had something to do with the fact that they were trying to draw Zach Edey out of the paint. But the thing that you mentioned, I think, is the key here for USC is Bronny James. They don't need him to be an all-star. They don't need him to be, they just need him to be a solid player, which if he's that, then this team maybe could get back on the straight and narrow path kind of thing. this is a team that when I watched them play, especially that Kansas State game, I liked what I saw from Collier. Boogie Ellis is Boogie Ellis. We've known what he is for years now. Kobe Johnson's dealt with some injuries. They've got some nice big guys, but it does seem like maybe they lack that tertiary score, and we'll just have to see if Bronny James is that. We obviously don't know how long it's going to take him to get ramped up and how how he's going to be when he actually steps foot on the court for an actual game. But I mean, if he's a solid, 10-5 guy a game, then I mean, like, that might be enough for them to be a solid team.
I mean, they might be for sure, because a lot of the big guys think they have some good ones who are like, good role players, maybe not scorers. And if they get three guys who can score, it could be good. Right now, it's just going to take some time to figure out how this is going to go. It can't just be the Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier show if they're going to do anything. For Gonzaga, it's still, well, number one, I have heard in the last 3 years, college basketball, 4 years, whatever it is, because he's a redshirt junior now, Graham Ike. I've heard a million ways to say his name.
I actually think I said it. I think I said it both ways on this podcast already. So
I think I have too. So I'm gonna say Graham Ike. You can go Ike. We'll keep on. One of us will be right. One of us will be wrong.
That's right.
They need to figure
Hedge
this.
bets.
Some of it is like, obviously him playing in the West. A lot of times announcers don't do the research or something. We saw the one game. Was it some of the games are played on some of the Root Sports Network and all this.
Root Sports.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not always great. So I'm going to call him Greg Mike. That's number one. But two, this team scares the hell out of me, Greg, because they have three guards and they all played over 35 minutes in this game. They don't have a guard coming off the bench that really provides anything. If you have one injury or one day with foul trouble, this team is like, they could be, it's one of the more impressive teams to me because I was low on them coming in because of the lack of depth. But I'm scared as hell if we're getting to March and they have no one else who's stepping up at guard besides the three guys they have in the starting lineup. So that's just something to note if you're filling out your brackets. They could make the Final Four with the way they're playing right now. But it's going to be hard for me to overcome that hurdle. The last game we're going to recap from our picks last week is Creighton and Nebraska. Creighton beats Nebraska. I think, Greg, this is not a bad loss for Nebraska, but I do think we're figuring out that Nebraska is more of a fraud type thing going on here. They were undefeated coming into this game. They lose by 29. It's not the end of the season. Tominaga had a pretty good game for them, 20 points. But to win in the Big Ten, how many games are they going to win? Can they make the tournament? Maybe barely. I don't think they're as good as maybe we thought going in.
Yeah, this really was for Nebraska. This was the Casey Tominaga show. I know Juwan Gary's had some decent games transferring in from Bama this year. You're right. I mean, there's not a lot there. I just like sometimes when we see teams that aren't necessarily usually good on a year-by-year basis, it maybe gives what gives college sports that flavor. So this was a game I did sit. I know NFL was on. I sat down and watched this game. Bengals weren't playing, so I took the time to watch this game. Defensively, Nebraska, they just crashed the paint. So we're not going to give you anything inside, and we're going to turn Creighton into a jump shooting team. And Creighton said, that sounds great because that's basically all we like to do outside of Kalkbrenner. Well, Kalkbrenner didn't get a lot of touches in this game. Something to think about. Only had 5 shots in the game. Did convert on a high rate. So Baylor Shireman puts up 19th. If this felt like I'm going to say it right this time, the Antonio Reeves game where I look at the box score and it's 6-19. I don't remember him putting up 19 threes because it felt like everything he was shooting was going in. That's not what the box score says. But this team is comfortable being a jump shooting team, and in games where you try and turn them not into a jump shooting team, they're going to dump it into Kalkbrenner, a guy who we talked about in the preseason. There's a well-roundedness to this team. I do get scared of a team that in games tends to rely on the jump shots. The only reason I'm not particularly worried is because we know they have that inside presence. They just didn't use it this game because they just took what the defense was giving them.
Absolutely. I have nothing further to take from that one. We know Creighton's good. Nebraska is the team that has to prove themselves, and we'll talk about them if they do anything notable the rest of the way. Otherwise, they might be forgotten about. So, other notable results. We mentioned Georgia Tech beat Duke. They also beat Mississippi State. Miles Kelly is one to watch out for them, a guard that I think is a little bit underrated. Damon Sotomayor is doing a good job for Georgia Tech so far. We'll see if that holds up. And then Mississippi State also loses to Southern. just a weird kind of week for Georgia Tech, Mississippi State, Duke, if you throw them in there too.
Yeah, just two teams going in opposite directions. Mississippi State been in the top 25, been a team. Of course, they're playing without Tolu Smith, not expected back until probably around conference play. One of their best players, if not their best player. Georgia Tech, not a team I had on my radar. Now they've got, this win in context. Maybe doesn't look as good as it did before Mississippi State lost to Southern, but it's still a win over a power conference team. Something that if you're Georgia Tech and Damon Stoudemire, you're going to take every time. You don't care if that team, how they look at the very next game, because honestly, once you get to conference play, that's probably going to look like maybe it's not going to be a quad 1 win, but it's probably going to be a quad 2 win. I have the net rankings up, but I'm not looking at where Mississippi State is right now. So looking good to start off for Georgia Tech in the Damon Stoudemire era.
Definitely looking good for him. He's doing a fantastic job. We'll keep on checking in these teams a little bit later. Another team that is having a wild week, or at least had a wild week last week, Villanova. After winning the battle for Atlantis, Greg, you called it. Don't know what happened when they get back to American soil. They are now 0-3 against Philadelphia teams or Pennsylvania teams, if you're not proper Philadelphia. They're right around there. And they lost to St. Joe's, who we talked about a little bit earlier with Kentucky, maybe more understandable. Then they lost to Drexel. So what the heck's going on here, Greg?
I don't know. I just happened to pick Villanova at the right time. They had just come off when they were going into the battle for Atlantis. They had just come off a rout of Maryland. I just thought maybe they'll ride some momentum in there. I like what's on their roster. Of course, you had already mentioned on this podcast that we kind of saw them pick it up towards the end of the year. Last year, once Justin Moore came back, I don't know what this is. There's a lot of talent on this team. We kind of heard some positive vibes coming out of Atlantis, but now this week, especially after these results, I'm already starting to hear where it's like whatever good came out of Atlantis, Kyle Neptune is wasted with these two results. You could maybe get away with one in particular. It would probably be the St. Joe's one, since we've already seen them play Kentucky tough. When you lose both of them in such a short span, they're going to need something. He's got to be on the hot seat. I know it's not been a long tenure for him, but I mean, just with what Villanova fans are used to, this is one where we could be looking at him gone after this year.
I think so too. It's a tough. I think Jay Wright maybe left it because of the NIL and what it could do to some of these private schools and programs and everything. They are 1-0 in quad 1 games, 2-0 in quad 2 games, 0-3 in quad 3 games. So you don't often find teams making the tournament with 3 losses in quad 3. That's not normal. So they have a lot of work to do, Greg, in their next 3 games at Kansas State versus UCLA and at Creighton. It could go from bad to worse here. That good time in Atlantis could be all but forgotten. Now, maybe they just lose to Pennsylvania teams, though, too, and then they'll win out the rest of the year. I don't know, but that's just something to keep in mind, that Villanova has had some ups and downs, and we've mentioned our issues with Kyle Neptune here before, and we'll see if he can right the ship before the end of the year. We also had Tennessee and North Carolina play this week. This is one we did not pick. We just missed it, and that'll happen.
Yeah, mea culpa. I made a mistake. I overlooked a game that we should have talked about, but I made up for it in the preseason by talking about Elliot Cadeau, who does look like he makes that team so much more efficient when he's on the floor. But Joe, I am sorry, I did overlook that one when we were looking at games to pick.
Oh, you're good. I mean, we're gonna miss some. We're gonna have games we probably shouldn't talk about when we do talk about it. It's all in the works. That's how it works. Elliot Cadeau, you mentioned, is the X factor here. North Carolina looks like a much better team. They win 100-92. Tennessee, not accustomed to giving up that many points whatsoever in a game under Rick Barnes. Very, I don't know, just uncharacteristic of them. Dalton Knecht scored 37 points. He had to leave the game with an injury. It's looking like he's going to be okay. It's not too serious of an injury. But Tennessee will need to be riding the ship too. It's a lot of these teams who went to Maui have a lot of losses on their schedule already. Tennessee will be able to right the ship, especially if Knecht's able to come back.
Yeah, we did see that Dalton Knecht was probable for their game against George Mason. That is tonight, so I would imagine their big game this weekend, that he'll be good for that. The defense scares me a little bit. If I feel like we just took this Tennessee team and we turned it on its head, because last year it was, man, this team can defend, or well, not just last year, but historically with these Rick Barnes coach Tennessee teams has been, man, this team can defend, but it is ugly on offense. And now all of a sudden we've got, man, this team can score, but it is ugly on defense sometimes. This is obviously the biggest outlier, giving up 100 to Carolina, but there's still some games in here where they're losing, and it looks like the defense plays a big part in that. Just something to monitor. I know, Joe, they're still top 5 in defense on KenPom. We've already mentioned there's a lot of preseason bias still in that, so not necessarily something you want to look at just yet, but just something to pay attention going forward, especially when they go up against Terrence Shannon this weekend and Marcus Damask and Dane Danger and whatnot. Just see if they're able to defend a little better, because we definitely know they can score, but if this team wants to be elite, they need to put that defense together. 4-3 is not a record we necessarily maybe had for this Tennessee team at this point in the season when we looked at them in the preseason, but here we are, and they don't have any bad losses, but there's definitely some worry points.
Definitely some stuff to correct for Rick Barnes. I think these next 2-3 weeks are going to be huge for a lot of teams. There's not as many games being played because teams are dealing with finals before kids go back, maybe for a short break to their homes. And also we have Christmas coming up, which will be another little break. So key time for teams to have a chance to fix some of their issues moving forward. One of the games we maybe should have seen coming, Greg, Northwestern beats Purdue a second straight year. They did it 92-88. This game went overtime. Boo Buie, 31 points, 9 assists. Looks like they're going to have something cooking in the Big Ten. Purdue, Zach Edey, 35 points, 14 rebounds. He's still doing great on the interior, but something we've mentioned, Greg, the guards for Purdue have to be better. Braden Smith had 6 turnovers in this game, I believe. If they're going to lose again in the tournament, it's going to be because of the guard play. Zach Edey is going to give you what he gives you at this point.
Yeah, we have the benefit of hindsight. We got to see last night's result. Purdue absolutely rolls over Iowa. So Edey 9 of 10 from the field, 25 points, 12 boards. Guards look like they played a little better, both shooting and distributing the ball. So, maybe this is just a blip. It's still conference play. We know that conference play in the Big Ten, it can be quite a bit, and that's that kind of that wall that the freshman guards hit last year. Now they're sophomores. We'll just have to keep an eye on this team going forward. There was a fantastic pass from Mason Gillis to Zach Edey to send this game to overtime. You thought maybe oftentimes when that kind of thing happens, a team gets the game to go to overtime, they pull it out in overtime because they have the momentum. So, Joe, I mean, like we have the benefit of hindsight of knowing that they went on to their next game and said, no, we're kings of this league. But I mean, what do you think the X's and O's of Purdue look like, losing a game like this?
I think this is more. I think it's more about how they are able to minimize the rotation. They are a team too that we talked about, teams going to 8-man rotations. That is going to need to get it down because they have, guys like Zach Edey who needs to be playing as many minutes as possible right now. Unless there's a matchup problem where he has to guard on the perimeter. He shot 20 free throws in this game. Even if he's not scoring the basketball field goals, he's impacting the game, getting other teams in foul trouble. Smith and Lawyer have to be on the floor. They're the guys you put in so much time and effort to last year to start, and they took you to great places. But there's bad games. So I think they need to work on handling pressure, and just working on that will be really good for them. But it's weird because they have, other than Lawyer, Smith, and Edey, like Kaufman was in the starting lineup. He played 13 minutes. Heidi played 18 minutes. First played 11 minutes. Mason Gillis played 29 minutes off the bench. Ethan Morton played 8 minutes. There's just so weird. I've never seen a team constructed like this where 3 or 4 spots get all the minutes and they stay in the game, and then the rest of the spots kind of split these minutes, and it's just abnormal to me. So that's what I think they need to figure out the most, is figuring out how to handle pressure and figuring out their rotation. So I think we already talked about Colorado State getting big games, big wins over Colorado and Washington. Washington has Gonzaga coming up, so we're going to keep an eye on that. And Colorado State has St. Mary's coming up, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. The other game we need to recap is Auburn beating Appalachian State beating Auburn. Said that one backwards. Not a game that if you're Auburn you really want to drop. It's going to be very competitive this year. in terms of the NCAA tournament and who gets in and who gets out. The other loss of the year is to Baylor, so there's still a lot to play for. As Greg, as you said, everyone gets one. But we had mentioned, too, the several times we've recorded this podcast, they played at Appalachian State, which is abnormal. We don't know what the situation is there. Johnny Broome played well, 21 points, 13 rebounds. If this game was at home, they'd probably win it. I mean, I don't know what that changes in anyone's mind, but scheduling is definitely something people need to pay attention to.
Yeah, just one little interesting tidbit. I know I heard this somewhere else, so I'm stealing it from some other podcast or something. I know, but Appalachian State also beat UNCW, so I don't know, just a little connection there. They actually killed them 86-56 a couple weeks ago. So I don't know, maybe they're a team to pay attention to. We'll just have to see, but we're still going with the Auburn. We like the way they defend, or I like the way they defend. I don't have concerns. These teams sometimes just have one of these blip losses, and we'll put it that. It stinks if it's when it comes in the NCAA tournament that you have a blip loss. That's just kind of how the sport works. But regular season, these things happened. You already mentioned it was an away game. Maybe somebody's related to somebody, knows somebody. That can't imagine it was a home and home type for the sake of, two teams agreeing to it. There's got to be some connection here that we're just not aware of. So one loss, not much to worry about, especially in context when, they're, like you said, their other one is against Baylor. Not too concerning for me. Obviously, a game you don't want to lose, could affect your seeding. Looks like they got Indiana coming up this weekend, so hopefully they get the roll back on it, because I've liked what I've seen from this team so far. Just unfortunate that they dropped this game.
I have too. We'll see if they're able to bounce back. You're right, just a blip on the radar. So we'll keep it moving. We have picks to do for the week, Greg. We have the Jimmy V Classic at Madison Square Garden is where we're going to start this week. We have Florida Atlantic and Illinois. Florida Atlantic is favored by 2.5 in this one, which has kind of surprised me, Greg. 6:30 Eastern tonight, Tuesday, December 5th, Madison Square Garden. Who you got?
I'm going to take Illinois. Of course, FAU had that little bit of a blip against Bryant. You talked about Terrence Shannon earlier in the year. I think Marcus Domask transferred in from Southern Illinois, where he played with Lance Jones, who's now at Purdue. I think he's been a little bit of a nice surprise for them. I don't know if it was supposed to be great, but definitely looks like he helps out that offense. Luke Goody's healthy again, so not any slight on FAU. Still think they're a great team, but I'm going to pick Illinois in this one. Joe, what are you thinking?
Illinois, I've been on Terrence Shannon since naming him a first-team All-American, preseason All-American this year. I think he's very, very good, playing like it. Florida Atlantic has had their blips so far. They're still ranked pretty highly in the net, surprisingly, with that quad 3 loss to Bryant. But I don't know. I'm not. I think they're fine overall, but going up against a team like Illinois, I think could be a problem. Neutral site game, so I was very surprised Illinois was not favored in this game. Next one up, we have in the Jimmy V Classic as well, North Carolina and UConn. This game will be starting after that game. It's projected to be at 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight. UConn's favored by 5.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take UConn. I just think they are rolling right now. They're playing really good basketball. We did see Stephon Castle. Looks like he should be maybe limited, but should be at least playing in this game. It already looked like he was warming up for the Kansas game. Carolina coming off that good win at Tennessee. I'm still picking UConn. I just think they're rolling right now, playing some good basketball. So, Joe, what are you taking?
I'm taking UConn as well. I like what Elliot Cadeau has shown us so far, but I'm not willing to take this North Carolina team in a big game quite yet. UConn, as mentioned, Tristan Newton's having a huge year where he's stepping forward. Karaban, Klingon, both playing well, despite Klingon's not so great performance at Kansas. I think he'll be fine. They'll get the win here, and the home court advantage in Madison Square Garden, I think will play a part. We have the Big 12 Big East Challenge up next. In this one, we have Oklahoma and Providence. Oklahoma is hosting this one on Tuesday, December 5th, and they are favored by 4.5 points.
I'm going to take Providence. I like Bryce Hawkins. We already know Devin Carter, what he's doing over there. Oklahoma's best win right now is USC. Their second best win is Iowa. Obviously, Oklahoma snuck into the top 25 this week, or was it last week they snuck into the back end? I can't recall. Providence has that good win over Wisconsin. They have an overtime loss to Kansas State. I just trust the personnel more from Providence. I'm not saying that this is far and away Oklahoma's game. You already mentioned it's at Oklahoma, but I just still like, and maybe it's just that I know that Providence team more, but that's what's leading me to pick them. Joe, what are you thinking?
I'm going Providence as well. I like Bryce Hopkins. I don't think Oklahoma has that impressive of a win on the resume, considering what's going on in USC right now and the fact that they're dropping out of the top 25 and everything. Iowa was also solid for them. But I really do like this Providence team. Devin Carter is a very good wing player as well. So I'm going to go with them on the road. I mentioned in one of the previous editions of this podcast, they're selling tickets for this for $3, as low as $3 right now. It doesn't seem like the environment will be too raucous. It doesn't seem like Oklahoma fans have bought into this team. And for that reason, I'm not going to buy in either. Now, I do think this is, this Tuesday is a good opportunity to bet on college basketball. We're both taking Providence. We're probably going to be wrong because that's how basketball works. But I'm taking some money line bets here, Greg. Providence, maybe another game we're going to pick up here with an underdog could win. I don't know, just something to think about. Next one up, I guess we didn't talk about that one. Okay, I'll mention the other one. Wisconsin and Michigan State. Wisconsin, I think, could have a chance to win, and Michigan State is favored over them at home. So just something to watch out. We're not going to pick that one, but just something to watch out for on Tuesday if you're into gambling. South Carolina and Clemson play on December 6th, 8 p.m. Mentioned how these teams have gotten off to hot starts. It's a rivalry game. Greg, where are you going?
This game, I put this on our slate just for the same reason that I put Nebraska and Creighton. South Carolina seems to be in the same spot that Nebraska was in. It looks like they've won quite a few games, an undefeated team. This is a rivalry game. I don't see anything yet that proves it to me, that makes me think they're going to win this game, especially when it's at Clemson. We've seen Clemson win some good games. Been a little bit more of, for me, I won't say a surprise, but they've even outperformed what I thought they'd be. I'll take Clemson in this one. Of course, maybe Brad Brownell is going to make me eat my words. But Joe, what are you thinking?
As much as I want South Carolina to win, I'm not against Clemson whatsoever. I think Clemson's a better team. I think they'll be able to get the job
now, Joe,
done.
you do know Dabo Swinney is not Clemson's basketball coach. He's only the football. Joe does not. He's not a big Dabo guy. I just want to remind you, picking Clemson is not picking Dabo in this case.
Oh, I know. I just like the name Meechie Johnson. I think if we got some big games in the tournament, somehow we have an alternate world where we're able to get Gus Johnson call on games in the NCAA tournament again, which needs to happen by presidential order or something. And we had Meechie Johnson going off. He's averaging 17 points per game. That'd be amazing. So I'm rooting for South Carolina to make the tournament and have some big games and have some announcers shout his name at the top of their lungs. But Clemson's going to win. They have a better team overall. We already talked about them enough. And I do think they're more real than South Carolina is this year. Texas and Marquette in the Big East Big 12 battle. It is the Shaka Smart revenge game. It is 8 p.m. at Marquette on December 6th.
You missed the chance to have a little alliteration there, the Shaka Showdown. So, just next time we're picking the Shaka Showdown, just make sure you say Shaka Showdown. It's fun to say. I'm going to take Marquette. Don't think I've seen much from Texas yet to make me think. Of course, they almost lost to Louisville in that Empire Classic that we talked about. And Max Asmus late shot is the only thing that lifted them in that game. Marquette, I know they're just coming off the loss to Wisconsin, but they're a fun team to watch. I'll pick Marquette in this one. Of course, it being Shaka, he's probably going to prove me wrong. I picked a lot of home teams this week, so we'll just have to see if that comes back to bite. Last week, I picked a lot of away teams, and it didn't go well for me, so thought I'd switch it up. But, Joe, what are you thinking?
Marquette for me, it's not the NCAA tournament, so my fears are not there. I love what Tyler Kolek is doing for them at point guard. Cam Jones, I think, is a perfect complement to him to be able to shoot the ball too. And Iguodaro as well on the inside, who is not related to Andre Iguodala as much as Bill Walton might want that to be true. Texas, you're right. We've seen those struggles so far this year. I think it's a team by the end of the year we can have a different feeling about, but right now they have to prove it. We are going to talk about Illinois and Tennessee. This is one of the first big Saturday games of the year. Greg, I know you mentioned that in a past podcast we recorded. Both teams have some big games, Illinois has a big game earlier in the week that we already talked about with Florida Atlantic. Greg, where do you see this one going?
I'm going to pick Tennessee. Again, one of the benefits to not recording this podcast on Sunday like we tried. We do have a little bit of an update on Dalton Connect. Sounds like he should be good to go in this game. He's probable for tonight. The Tennessee's playing George Mason. I believe that's a home game. I'll go ahead and take Tennessee. Of course, I do like. There's a lot to like about that Illinois team. I already picked them to win a game earlier in the week in that FAU matchup. Joe, what are you thinking?
They probably split these games, but I'm going to take Illinois to win both. I think they can beat Tennessee. Tennessee will not have Dalton Connect fully healthy, probably. I mean, he's definitely going to play earlier this week. It's probable to play earlier this week and everything, but I just don't think he's an ankle injury with someone like him is going to be helpful. Illinois, as mentioned, big on Terrence Shannon. I will stick with them. I think Coleman Hawkins is a good player as well to watch. Maybe a little bit better this year as they have more options and he doesn't feel like he has to do as much and handle the ball and do things that are not always the smartest things. So that should help too. I'm going to go Illinois to win on the road. All right, so the next one we have Wisconsin at Arizona. That one is also on Saturday, 3:15 Eastern. Wisconsin had a big win last week. Greg, what are you feeling?
I'm gonna pick Wisconsin. This is going to be my. I know Wisconsin's the team that's on our radar, but this is going to be my upset pick of the week. I think even Wisconsin, yes, a good team, but I think most people would say Arizona's is at least perceived to be a much better team. This is at Arizona. I'm going to pick Wisconsin to make Arizona a little uncomfortable and go ahead and win the game.
I'll go Arizona. I mentioned this with Kentucky too, but I also feel the same is true of Arizona. I like that their guards do different things well. If you need an isolation bucket, you can go to Caleb Love. If you need someone to settle down the offense, you have Boswell to do that. It's just a perfectly balanced thing where and Pele Larson too as well. I think he just brings something different to the table. They can win games in different ways that way. We all know about Omar Ballo on the inside. I'm going Arizona. I could see Wisconsin winning this one, but I actually think, like I mentioned earlier, they probably win the game earlier in the week against Michigan State while they're still figuring things out, more so than winning at Arizona. The Crosstown Shootout, Cincinnati and Xavier. This one's at Xavier, 6:30 Eastern Time. These two teams not projected to be the best teams, but we are a Cincinnati podcast. We figured, should say the City of Cincinnati podcast, not the School of Cincinnati podcast. So we figured we might pick this one too. Greg, which way are you leaning?
Yeah, I'm picking Xavier. It's been a long time since UC has won at Xavier. I think they're a little bit better of a team. I don't think they're far and away a better team, but this game is at home. And Joe's test that we use, I know this is a rivalry game, but StubHub shows the tickets are $105. So that little test that we use for Oklahoma tells us, the opposite for Xavier, if that actually means anything. But hey, I agree with Joe. Fans will tell you what they think by pulling the money out of their pockets to go to the game. So I'll pick Xavier. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it is. It typically is most years. Joe, what are you thinking?
Xavier, I think it's not an easy pick. Cincinnati's been playing very well offensively this year, and Xavier has their issues. They have some losses, mostly to good teams. Obviously, Oakland's not the best loss, but I'm impressed by the freshmen. Green and Swain are both pretty good, and even some of the big guys, the transfers, the foreigners, have played pretty well this year too. I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust Sean Miller. I'm going to trust the home court advantage. Not too much travel going to be had by Cincinnati, but that environment could be crazy and create some troubles for some young Cincinnati players too.
Just for reference, Trey Green it was an illness was why he not play. I did see Rothstein tweeted that he's supposed to play tonight. I know that obviously the Crosstown Shootout is this weekend, but Xavier has Delaware tonight. So that means we would expect him to be playing in the Crosstown Shootout. I just wanted to mention that since I mentioned that he did not play in the Houston game.
Yes, definitely. Last game we're going to pick, Greg, the Holy War, BYU and Utah. This one's at Utah. Both teams have had a pretty good start to the season.
So the first time we went through this, I had no idea who I was going to pick. I picked it live. I'm going to pick Utah because the game's at home. These two teams both look like BYU's been quite the surprise. They were picked, I want to say the coaches poll had them 12th or 13th in the Big 12. They're well outperforming their what they were supposed to be early in the year. I know we've already mentioned Utah. You like a couple players on their team. I'm going to take Utah. If this game was at BYU, I would probably take BYU, but this game's in Salt Lake, so I'm going to take Utah.
They pulled the old switcheroo on me. All right. I'm going Utah. As mentioned, I like a lot of their players. Rolly Worster, mentioned earlier, over 5 assists per game. That really helps things out. Gabe Madsen stretching the floor is really big for them too. And then Brandon Carlson on the interior. Just too much for BYU. BYU's got a great start to the season. I don't really think they're going to be all that good, especially in the Big 12 this year. We'll go with Utah. All right. Any final thoughts, Greg?
Just like last week, I can't wait to pick every game right and nothing weird to happen.
That's how it always goes. My turn to remind everyone to like and subscribe on YouTube. Also to like and subscribe wherever your podcast. Give us a star rating. Let us know how we're doing. We'll use that feedback to make our show better in the future. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see everyone next week.
Thanks, guys.